the concept of telling a big lie long enough and loud enough until it becomes, well, accepted truth. It may not have originated with Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, but it's been around a long time in devious and often evil political circles.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
So what do I mean by the big lie? Well, here in the United States, there are several big lies that are being perpetrated on a daily basis with willing partnership of much of our corrupt and lying news media. They like being a part of the establishment. They like having almost a royal status at CNN. They are the new ministers of truth. The folks over at Facebook and Twitter, they think that they have a market on what the truth should be. Yet we are being completely bombarded all over with big lies. One of the big lies is that the United States is, well, we're a racist country. Always have been, always will be, until we get rid of white supremacy and white Christian men. Well, we can't have a normal world. Has there been racism in this country? Of course there has. Are we a truly racist nation, worse than any other in the world? Absolutely not. That's the lie. Well, we had slavery in the United States, yeah. And so did the British, and so did many other nations across the world. People in Africa sold their neighbors into slavery. Blacks selling blacks into slavery to Muslims, who then sold them to British traders and bought them to America. Not a nice history. But we fought a war partly over that issue. That's just one of many lies. If you were to ask people today, many people on the street that really don't pay attention to the news, but they pick up on the sound bites of the day, being a racist nation and police brutality. If you were to ask somebody, how many unarmed black individuals are shot and killed by the police every year? You may not know the number, but I'm going to kind of help you out a little bit. We're going to look at last year in particular. If you were to ask many people on the street today, particularly college students that should know better, if you ask how many black people unarmed are killed by the police every year, some will say it's like 10,000. Some may say 1,000. Some really don't know. But when confronted with the reality that it's like under 20, and many of those under 20 were violently fighting back against the officer or against somebody else, we have made a whole industry and burning down cities. People have died in these protests when lootings occurred. So there's the lie that we are a racist nation, irredeemably racist, and it must be fixed by politicians, of course. One of the biggest lies that's out there today, and I'm not going to talk about the racism one. I mean, this is just rhetoric that is used to continually divide us. Everything that seems to come out of the political left is used as a divisive measure to divide us. Those that have, those that have not. Those that have achieved must have stolen it. They didn't really work for it. You didn't build that. We've heard it all before. Today I want to focus on one of the biggest lies that is out there, and it is a whopper. And it has been used as a wedge issue. It has been used as an indoctrination tool against us. They're indoctrinating our children in schools telling them that the really super big crisis of our day, the real threat
to confront the existential threat of climate change. It is an existential threat.
On what is an existential threat to us as human beings.
Climate change is the existential threat.
And this is really an existential threat.
What you just heard are four individuals. I think you can recognize their voices. They just shared with you a big lie, a huge lie, a massive lie. And they're doing it to gain control over your life. You know, I have been watching and these various videos. I've been reading all this material about how the world's going to end. How many people remember we were told we only have 12 years left? And if we don't fix things in 12 years, it's all over. I mean, it's just over. We have to do something dramatic, and we have to do it now. This has been the mantra we've been hearing for quite a long time. And so many young people today believe every word of it. I mean, every word of it, that we only have 10 years left now, maybe 9 years. We're going to have the temperature of the earth rise by 1.5 degrees Celsius somewhere by, 2052. I'll be 98 years old in 2052. Some of you many of us will not be around here in 2052. Have you ever noticed when it comes to these great predictions of disaster for the earth, they're always somewhere way down the road? Now, before you say, well, Bob, now this is what the scientists are saying. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, and you can disagree. I don't care if you're screaming at your radio or your phone, if you're listening as a podcast, getting ready to send me a nasty gram email, go for it. But I'm going to talk some sense here. Let's get away from the emotion and the rhetoric and the nonsense and the foolishness of all the garbage we have been fed. Last week, we celebrated the anniversary of Earth Day. 51 years of Earth Days. I remember the first one quite well. I was just starting out my radio career 51 years ago, still young, still in high school. And I was sent out with what they called back then, a portable tape recorder to get some sound bites of the Earth Day festivities in our little small community in upstate New York. And we were hearing all about the Earth and how we had a climate crisis, or whatever they called it back then. The Earth was in peril because of mankind. This is 51 years ago. We were reminded of our reputation of pollution. We were reminded of all the environmental things we did wrong. And the experts from places like Cornell University, MIT, and others, they shared their wisdom on the terrible state of our planet and how we only have 10 years left. And definitely, in the next 30 years, if we didn't really do something dramatic, it was all over. I can remember, listen, this is where so many young people miss it because they don't know some of the history of how this climate change stuff has been used for decades to extract taxpayer money and put control over the things you can and cannot do, how much you can and cannot travel. There's always something I've learned about the left in particular, where people that are conservative need to learn from them one lesson. There is one lesson worth learning. The left, they recognize that their goals may not be reached in their lifetime, but they are, and I'm going to say it, you can disagree, you can argue, you can email, you can complain. I think it's a demonic spirit. I really believe it is demonology. It's demonic. That their goals for enslaving the planet and controlling it and worshiping it, even though it may not be achieved in their lifetime. They will fight with vigor to get to that point. And opportunist politicians just jump right on board. They see this as a controlling wedge issue. And politicians on the left, they don't work with just one issue. They have multiple issues they juggle in the air to keep us all afraid. The pandemic was one. Well, we must wear face coverings. You have some people that are now saying, let's put them on 2-year-olds and let's wear them forever. Literally. Why don't we just wear them forever? I'm trying to think how mankind got to this point and we survived without a face covering, without being an extinct species. But see, the wisdom of the leftist, Satanist politicians, and yes, there are leftists and there are Satanist politicians. There's some that claim to be conservative that I think also would fall into the satanic realm as well. I've been watching, I did a little research over the last couple of days. I didn't want to spend too much time because, this could turn out to be hundreds of hours of radio programs I don't really want to get into. But just taking a look at some of the claims that have been made over the last 50 years or so of Earth days and predictions. You just heard these lying politicians saying this is the existential threat. This is it. If we don't fix this, we're doomed. We're doomed, I tell you, we're doomed. Bernie Sanders saying the planet's going to burn up. It's just going to burn up. Al Gore said it's going to just burn up like a big ball of fire. Hey, I'm going to borrow this from an old Rush Limbaugh show, Paul Shanklin.
The earth is a precious thing because of man, it's warming. Earth's temperature has risen half a degree higher. So obviously the world will soon be a ball of fire. Our whole world will be a burning ball of fire. Polar bears drown as the seas get higher. As it burns, the earth on fire, a ball of fire. The taste of fame is sweet. Without this gig, who'd listen to me? So change your ways, every man and child. Oh, before the fire goes wild, our whole world will be a burning ball of fire. Polar bears drown as the seas get higher. As it burns, the earth on fire, a ball of fire. Our whole world will be a burning ball of fire. Polar bears drown as the seas get higher. As it burns, the earth on fire, a ball of fire. As it burns, the world on fire, a ball of fire.
When I go back to Earth Day of 1970, 51 years ago, what were they saying at that time? What was our climate disaster du jour of 51 years ago? Very simple. Go to the Boston Globe. They had an article dated April 16th, 1970. And this was all dovetailed with the Earth Day. Scientists predict new ice age by the 21st century. Air pollution may obliterate the sun and cause a new ice age in the first third of the next century. If population continues to grow and the Earth's resources are consumed at the present rate, Well, it's all over. All we heard in 1970 was the Earth's going to freeze over because of mankind. We need fewer people. We need to get rid of people. We need to get rid of pollution. We need to get rid of fossil fuel. And on and on and on it goes, because if we don't, well, we're going to be in an ice age, man-made global ice age. And we'll all die. We'll all just simply die. Look, let's go back. Here's another one. This comes from 1969. This guy, Paul Ehrlich, who was a biologist, and he was one of the Earth Day biggies, said, you know something? He said that by 1989, by 1989, everybody would disappear in a cloud of blue steam in 20 years. He warned of disastrous famine. And he urged, you ready for this? Placing sterilizing agents in our foods and drinking water so basically mankind would go extinct, and then this way that would save the world. And all these kind of, well, reprobates of their age, they're the ones that were advising then President Richard Nixon, and then we got the Environmental Protection Agency, which has been just basically scooping up money for decades, and a lot of what they have done over the decades is questionable. What do you mean questionable? Yes, questionable. You look over the history of Earth Day and the changing narrative. Well, of course, we all didn't disappear in 1989 in this blue steam. We didn't freeze to death by the year 2000. None of it ever worked out the way they said it was going to work out. All the predictions we were told, I can remember this. I've said this before on the radio show, maybe you're new. I want you to remember, I'm like 16 years old. I'm out there doing my first little radio gig, recording some of this stuff. And I had an impressionable mind, as anybody that age would, because, why would experts, why would our schools, why would anybody be lying to us? I didn't take that assumption. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, maybe this is serious. After all, the Cuyahoga River caught fire not long ago. And we've been told because of mankind, that'll be a dead river for the next, 10,000 years. 10,000. Could never come back because of mankind's pollution. Cuyahoga River in Ohio, it's dead. All that pollution from Akron, it's over. You've ruined the river. It'll be just a barren wasteland for 10,000 years. I can remember, I can't remember which guy, of course, it's been so long, but I can remember this one guy, very professor-like, up in front of the microphone after, some rock band had played something, explaining how bad it's going to get by the 1980s, by no later than 1990, like 20 years. I mean, we have 10 years, we have 5 years to get our act together, and then if we don't, in 20 years, it's too late. We'll all freeze to death. He said if you're thinking about trying to escape the brutal winters that are coming to the United States, even Miami, Florida will be buried in snow every January by 1990. Now, I will admit that during that period of time, I can remember the late 60s into the early 70s, we had a climate cycle, and that's what they really are. Climate goes through these cycles and oscillations. We had some pretty tough winters. I can remember blizzards in places like Long Island, upstate New York, and we continued to have them for several years. You would almost believe maybe they're right. Maybe we are going to freeze to death. Maybe we are going to have a man-made cycle of the Ice Age. But something happened, and I noticed it too. In the middle to latter part of the 1980s, and I'm going to just kind of go back in my own personal history here. I used to spend my summers at my grandparents' house in Long Island. And they lived near Manhasset Bay, just a bay on the north shore of Long Island, about, I don't know how many miles outside of New York City. And there'd be some pretty nice warm summer days, but every night it was rather cool. My grandparents never needed air conditioning in that house. It really never got that hot at night. It got a little bit in the daytime, but they just never bothered to put air conditioning in. I guess they were born way before air conditioning was invented. But I can remember how nice it was, that cool breeze that came in every night. And some nights, even in July and August, you may want to wear a sweater out there if you were outdoors after dark. By the 1980s, it seemed that it wasn't as cool. The breeze wasn't there like it was. And by that time, I had already moved to the South. I was living primarily in the Carolinas and Georgia at that time. We would visit, and I kind of noticed that it seemed a little bit warmer at night, not the daytime. It was about the same. It got a wee bit warmer. Didn't mean they didn't have snow and all that. It's just that we had this kind of a cycle where the summers were just a little bit warmer. And so what happens by the late 1980s, early 1990s? Well, everything they said about global freezing was tossed out the window. And suddenly it became global warming. In other words, nobody talked much about the climate for several years. It was not the big topic. All throughout the 1970s, all you saw were stories. Time magazine, any major newspaper, you name it, had one story after another, after another, after another about the coming ice age and how the pollution of mankind was destroying the earth. Got to fix it. Then we had another one come out in the we started seeing in the 1980s and in the 70s, acid rain. Remember that? Acid rain would destroy everything. The ocean will be dead in just a few years because of acid rain. The entire ocean system will be dead. Deader than Lake Erie. I've been to Lake Erie in the last 5 years. It's not dead. No end in sight for a cooling trend. We were told every bit of it. It can't be stopped unless mankind does dramatic things. So acid rain, well, we discovered 10 years later, even the government said, well, after a big study, there is no acid rain crisis. Even as late in 1978, no end in sight to this cooling trend. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. 1978. So now let's get ourselves to more current times. All of a sudden, by the late 1980s, when the global freezing was not happening, and you start to see temperatures rising a bit after falling a bit, the new mantra of the day, global warming. The earth is going to burn up like a big ball of fire. We're going to starve to death because we're not going to have any water. It's just going to boil off the planet. We're going to have all the ice gone from the polar caps. We're told that more droughts are going to be likely. 1988 will be one of the worst ever, according to Miami News. And you start looking at the forecast dates of when things were supposed to be just really awful. They kept getting missed. Prepare for long, hot summers. Well, have they really occurred? Everything you read, I don't care what newspaper it is, you'll see that all these predictions and all the experts and all the scientists agree that all this horrible stuff where the earth will just come to a screeching halt and be burned up alive or frozen over, whichever. Yeah, this time we're burning it up alive. It's all going to be a big ball of fire. It'll all happen in the next 50 years. That's what they were saying in 1990. In 50 years. We're 30 years in. And they're still trying to sell this pig with lipstick of global warming. But see, they've gotten smart. Let's go through the decade of 2000 to 2010 and 2010 till roughly right now. They were predicting, by the way, that we would have, they showed Washington, D.C., for example, by long before now, would go from its current 35 days a year of over 90 degrees to 85 days a year. And the level of the ocean will rise anywhere up to 6 feet. That'll happen. And we'll have these super strength hurricanes literally every week. This is what they were saying in 1990. But you know, when you look at the hottest days in Washington, D.C., they peaked in 1911. Hadn't been that high since. And for the longest time, the days over 90 in D.C. have been pretty consistent or low. I remember this story, too. You remember the Maldives Islands? They were saying this in 30 years. Now, I'll give you the date in just a second. This gradual rise in the average sea level will completely cover this Indian Ocean island nation of 1,196 small islands within the next 30 years. Well, that story was written 33 years ago. 33 years ago. It didn't happen. Every one of these apocalyptic scenarios just do not occur. So by the end of the Maldives, and its 200,000 people could come sooner if drinking water supplies dry up. Rising seas will obliterate nations, based upon what was said in 1989. The house that I have in Florida should be basically encroached by water by now. It isn't. And something tells me that one of the reasons the experts love to talk about something 30 and 40 years from now, we need to act now to save us from 30 or 40 years from now. In other words, I've been hearing we have 10 years left for 51 years. And I'm getting a little bit tired of it. I'm tired of the big lies being used by groups, organizations, and politicians to scare, control, and to gain more power over our lives. If you don't believe that politicians want power over your life, then you didn't pay attention during the pandemic of the past year. They've used it, and now the existential threat of our time, climate change, because, hey, by 2050, when every one of these loudmouth politicians have been dead and gone for 20 or 30 years or more, and just like the last predictions, I predict, and I think I have a better track record, they're never going to come true. They're never going to come true. We're going to talk a little bit more about this topic on the other side of our break. We're kind of running long. But I am just so tired, and I am so over these apocalyptic eco predictions that are all false, phony, wrong, and never come true. Basically speaking, the only thing with 100% batting average when it comes to climate change is getting it wrong. And that, my friend, you can take to the bank. The fact that when it comes to predictions, the experts have consistently, for a half a century or more, have gotten it wrong. So why would they get it right now? We'll talk more about it on the other side of the break. Really quick, do Do you believe in the work that we're doing here at Truth to Ponder? I'm not an expert on everything. I'm just trying to distill simple facts that you can look at, do your own research, and come to your own conclusion. I know you don't agree with everything I say, and that's okay. I would love to hear from you. Do you listen on shortwave? I need to know what frequencies you're listening to, because it really does help to decide where to put more money into more airtime as the budget allows. There's some stations I'm hoping to add. There's some frequencies I'm hoping to add. There may be some that are not really being listened to. So just trying to be, I just don't want to waste money. I want to maximize the reach. And if you want to help a little bit, all monies we're getting these days just strictly goes to airtime. And you can do it from the website truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. If you prefer to, use conventional mail to contact us, you can still use 21 Berkshire, BERKSHIRE, 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263. That's our secure box here, number 263, in Sky Valley, 2 words, Sky Valley, Georgia, and the zip code 30537. Once again, 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, Sky Valley, Georgia, 30537. And we will be right back.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
The Steam Kettle Train. Shalom Aleichem. This is the nice Jewish boy, Jonathan Kahn, your Jewish connection, bringing you the riches of your Jewish roots in Jesus. Now get your pen out as fast as you can so you don't miss out on receiving a special free gift you're going to get and love in a moment. Now, there was once a missionary in Africa who was trying to teach the natives what a locomotive train was. They'd never seen one. Now, the missionary took 2 planks of wood to represent the tracks. Then he lined up the carts, one in front of the other, each representing a locomotive car. And then at the front, he set up a few oxen, one with a steam kettle around its neck to represent the engine. It was clever. And yet, if one of the natives looked at the missionary's concoction and rejected the whole idea of the train as ridiculous, maintaining that nothing of the kind existed, he'd be right. So it is with our ideas of God. We use words to talk about God. We use thoughts to think about God. But all our words and thoughts are just, at best, wooden planks and steam kettles. Our doctrines, our theology classes, they're all just oxen and carts. They're the best we have, but they fall short, far short of the real thing. No matter how long you've been in the Lord, God is more than you've ever been taught. God is far greater and far better than anything you've ever said about him or sung about him or even thought about him or even dreamed about him. God is more. God is beyond. So don't ever think you've got God all figured out. You don't. There's so much more of God you've yet to discover and yet to learn and have yet to know. That's why it says, seek the Lord, seek him, and never stop seeking him. No matter how long you've known him or think you have, get beyond the words, get beyond the talk, beyond the doctrines, beyond the thoughts. Come into the Holy of Holies where the real God is, and everything else is just wooden planks and steam kettles. Want more? Ask for The Stranger. Now, how'd you like to receive special daily meditations and teachings with the riches of your Jewish roots in Jesus to give you victory for every day of your week, and updates on Israel and prophecy, and a free subscription to Sapphires and the incredible The Mystery of the Temple Doors? All free. You'll love it. How do you get all this? Easy. Just remember Jesus' real Hebrew name, Yeshua, and dial it. That's all you do. Just dial 1-800-YESHUA-1. You'll be so blessed. But call now, 1-800-YESHUA-1. That's all you do. I invite you to join me in the Great Commission to bring salvation back to the Jewish people and to reach millions of unreached peoples around the world in 5 continents. Just call now, 1-800-YESHUA-1. That's YESHUA-1. Or write me direct, The Nice Jewish Boy, Box 1111, Lodi, Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. It's A Nice Jewish Boy, Box 1111, Lodi, Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. Well, till next time, this is Jonathan Kahn saying Shalom Aleichem, peace be to you, my friend, in the name of Messiah, Elohim, who is God.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to part 2 of our Monday edition of Truth to Ponder. A lot to cover in this segment, and I hope you can stay with me. If you listen as a podcast, you may want to share this one with your friends, especially this segment, this part of the program, if you have friends that are in the United Methodist Church. I'm not picking on one particular church today. I'll talk about others from time to time. In the first segment, we talked, and this will all tie together now. Talked about this climate change, false predictions, and how it's banged over our heads. Our children in schools are indoctrinated that we are destroying the planet. We are killing the wildlife. We are stripping the ozone layer off. At least that's what they said 30 years ago. The narrative is consistent. Human beings are destroying the planet, and thus human beings must either be controlled or eliminated. There's no other way around it. We must be controlled or we must be eliminated. We need less of us on the planet. That's what they say. And I'm concerned. In my lifetime, the things that I've seen, all the wrong predictions, you've heard them too. During the break, I happened to look at something really quick, getting ready for this segment. And it's going to go back to 2015 and 16. The National Weather Service predictions for that particular winter. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the map, I'm looking at the prediction. Boy, did they get it wrong. Totally wrong. Just like when they said after Hurricane Katrina, we will have continually bigger and worse hurricanes every year from now on because of man-made global warming. And then we had a 10-year hiatus on any hurricanes hitting the United States. They got it wrong. Consistently, those that are trying to use climate change, man-made climate destruction, as part of their political agenda, they get it wrong. Yet they keep coming back over and over again, ignoring the fact they were wrong, and they indoctrinate our young children. It has now permeated our colleges and universities, and people that really don't pay attention just believe the soundbite of the day. In the Bible, it says there's nothing new under the sun. This entire environmental issue has been around for quite a long time. It really goes back centuries. And St. Paul reminds us of this in the book of Romans. Now, this is the part of the book of Romans that many people on the left side of the political spectrum wishes they could just rip out of the Bible or explain away. They simply ignore it. But see, what St. Paul reminds us is a truism that goes back to the Garden of Eden, literally. St. Paul is writing to the church at Rome, and a lot of us forget that Rome was kind of a strange place. The Roman Empire was beginning to show the signs of their internal weaknesses that over the centuries would just destroy them. If we go to verse number 20, Romans 1:20, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Verse 21, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God. Let me say that again. Because when they knew God, they glorified him not as God. Neither were they thankful, but because of their vain imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. How many How many times have you heard people on the left say, we follow the science. We follow the science. We believe in science. You know, those Christians, they don't believe in science. They believe in fantasies and fairy tales. Conservatives, they don't believe in science. Guess what? We really do. It's the folks on the left that truly do not believe in science. Their science predicted global freezing. That didn't happen. Their science predicted my house would be underwater. It didn't happen. The science predicted the ice caps would be gone 7 years ago. It didn't happen. The science has been consistently wrong, yet we keep praising the science. Professing themselves to be wise, verse 22, they became fools. I don't want to talk about this too much, but I'll just say this. The pandemic is a great example. Somebody posted a picture, 2 pictures of Dr. Fauci, identical pictures. He would like to see a debate between these 2 individuals, the Fauci of 2020 and the Fauci of 2021. Because it's been a changing narrative for an entire year. Where is the science in a changing narrative with predictions that never ring true? Right down to wearing a face mask. They don't work. Yes, they do work. Hey, they're a magic mask. You know, put on the magic mask. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. They changed the glory of an incorruptible God into an image made like unto corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up to vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another. Men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet. And even then, they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, and God gave them over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventor of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in doing them. You know, those words of Scripture, it won't be long before they are considered hate speech. They're going to be purely hate speech. We live in a truly unusual time. I have a friend that I'm going to be trying to bring on the program, maybe tomorrow, maybe Thursday, not sure what day it's going to work out for this week. He's a former United Methodist minister. He's actually a clergyman in the same group that I am in today. Had a chance to visit with him and his church back in January. The United Methodist Church, I can remember people that I knew 30, 40 years ago. Pastors, members, people involved. And I had a great respect for many of them. I knew a guy that was working at a radio station as a news director at a big radio station in South Carolina, in Charleston. And he was studying for the ministry to be an ordained Methodist pastor. And working. He was having a really hard time. But look where that church has gone in 40 years. Look where the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America has gone in 40 years. Look where many Presbyterians, United Church of Christ, go down the list, where they have walked away from the gospel and they're preaching this perverted gospel. There are things happening that I see in the churches, and I shake my head in total and disbelief. The United Methodist Church, there's a church in Bloomington, Illinois, that has announced that a drag queen, a transvestite, a man who dresses as a woman, is a candidate now for being a pastor. His name is Isaac Simmons, who's on the staff at what's called Hope Church. And he regularly dresses as a woman on Sunday mornings. I'm looking at a picture right now, and I'm listening to a video. Wasn't long ago, I think it was the Sunday before last. Simmons dressed in his usual garb to celebrate his weird abnormalities. This is what Romans is talking about. This is kind of the thing. This is some of the weirdness that St. Paul warns about when we worship the earth over God and we start celebrating our sin. And they were having what's called Drag Sunday. This guy, Isaac Simmons, now is a candidate for ministry. And I found a public video that he posted, and it lasts a couple of minutes. Whether I can endure listening to all 2 minutes remains to be seen. But I want you to hear this guy, and I'm going to describe what he's wearing so you have an idea. He is wearing a red wig, and he's wearing a dress, and he's got this Hope Church sign in rainbow colors, and this is what he's sharing in this video. Listen to the words. You don't want to see the video, but just listen to Isaac Simmons, a drag queen and candidate for the pastoral ministry in the United Methodist Church.
In the name of God, the Mother, the Father, and the trans-identifying person of color, I pray that all those who hear my voice today may experience the liberating power of your love and grace, O God. That they may join with me in the marvelous movement of a justice-filled moment of transition.
Okay, obviously I'm not going to make it 2 minutes and 47 seconds of this. 20 seconds is enough. Totally enough to recognize this is not right. This is wrong. And sadly, a church with a wonderful history going back a long time to the Wesley brothers has been destroyed and trashed by the leftists of this world, those that worship the earth, they've gotten into so many of the mainline churches. The Episcopal Church is a disaster these days. The Methodist Church, United Methodist Church, so many. And all I can remember is what St. Paul says, get out from among them and do not touch the unclean thing. This guy Isaac, who dresses with the red wig and the glasses and the dress and the earrings and all that goes with it. Yeah, whenever he's dressed as a woman, he goes by the name, you ready for this? Pentecost. Pentecost. I'm sorry, but I'm going to tell you as a called and ordained servant of God's word, that is blasphemy, what this individual is doing. Making a mockery of all things holy and reducing it to sensuality and carnality. This is exactly what St. Paul was writing about in Romans chapter 1. We are seeing it today in a lot of our churches in the United States. I want to just take a moment here. There's so many things in my mind. We talked about the climate issue in the first half of the program. And it is one of the issues that laid the groundwork for the kind of world we have today, the kind of churches we're beginning, and I use the word church in a very loose definition. These churches, I can say without a doubt, are not a part of the body of Christ, period. They simply are not. They are doing what St. Paul wrote. They're following another gospel, which is not the gospel. They are following another gospel, which is not the gospel. Notice the word, everything is social justice these days. It's all about social justice. It's all about equality. It's all about our carnality and sensuality. And all these things must be celebrated in the name of what is called a church. This is blasphemy. This is heresy. This is damnable doctrine. And it's coming out of mainline churches that God will harshly judge. When I go back and I think of 1970 and the first Earth Day, last week we celebrated anniversary 51 of Earth Day. If you could have showed me a little, movie of the world we have today, some of the things being said in the churches today, some of the things said by politicians today, even as somebody in high school would look at you and think you're crazy, there is no way that could ever happen in the United States. There's no way that the majority of people would accept such silliness, such foolishness, and from a Christian point of view, such heretical teaching and mockery of the gospel and a mockery of the cross and a mockery of the resurrection. It was just, you couldn't fathom the idea. It was not going to happen. Yet systematically over time, it did. When I was in high school, I had a teacher, I think it was social studies. I'm trying to remember the guy's name, but certain little quotes stand out. He reminded us, when you go to a riverbank and you see these flattened and shiny rocks, how long did it take for the water to erode those rocks to be so smooth and shiny? It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a day. It took quite a long time. And see, this is what's happening in our world today. You could never have come out and thrown this entire agenda that's being thrown at us today and had anybody buy into it. But once you got a hold of the schools, once you got into the seminaries of many of the major mainline churches, over a period of a half a century, look where we ended up. And we have people that were born in the 1990s or around the year 2000. They're turning 20, 21 now, that buy 100% into this guy Isaac, who goes by the name Pentecost, and think it's all normal. I've met many a younger person, and I'm not throwing off, don't get me wrong. Those that are the product of a public school education and have been in churches that have really never preached the fullness of the gospel, whether it be a mainline church that threw away the gospel and invented a new one, or even some of the contemporary churches that the sermons are not really, they're more like pep talks with a side of Jesus. And it's all about how I feel. So you have people that are in their teens and even in their 20s today, approaching 30, that think all of this is just fine. There's nothing wrong with this. Why are we getting so upset? Look at the beautiful and pretty rainbow. The church is in a lot of trouble. If this is what your church has become, I don't care what denomination you belong to, doesn't matter. I'm thinking of a church that I know, a Lutheran church that I know several actually, but a couple that come to mind, where this behavior of little Miss Pentecost there, or Isaac, the guy, the drag queen, they would be fine with this. Well, what's wrong with this? We're all supposed to love one another. We're all supposed to be showing that Christian love. Well, Christian love is telling you the truth. The most despicable lie in the faith today is when you see someone like a Pentecost giving this heresy that she shares, and I could never go through all of the time. There's no way I could deal with 2.5 or more minutes of what you were listening to. And I've seen a few other little short videos that Pentecost has made, or Isaac, that's the real name, Isaac Simmons, candidate for the ministry in the United Methodist Church. You can pretty well count on it. This will happen. And it's scary. How could churches that 50 years ago proclaimed the gospel of Jesus Christ throw it away and buy into another gospel, which is not the gospel? But they did. This is what has happened in 50 years. Where's the church going to be in 50 years from now? Where's it going to be 5 years from now at the rate we're going? Church is afraid of viruses. They close real easy, so it's real easy to deceive them. They've embraced this life. They fear the virus more than they fear God. They fear the state more than they fear God. And now we have this, Brother Lou's colony, let's all love one another stuff. If you are pretending that we should all just get along and be nice and polite when somebody says this is the work of Christianity, what, little Miss Pentecost, Isaac Simmons says, you're not doing them any kindness and love. Love is being truthful. Love is being honest. The gospel was not meant to simply comfort you where you're at. It's to prick your conscience to realize you're lost. You need a Savior. And when you need a Savior, that means your life needs to be changed. We throw off the old nature and take on the nature of Christ. The nature of a drag queen is not the nature of Christ. The nature of sin and sexual immorality is not the nature of Christ. I'm going to be, like I say, I'm going to bring a friend of mine on, hopefully tomorrow, maybe Thursday. Former United Methodist pastor, man, he has a life to share. And I hope that you can hear it. There needs to be a ministry. I think the time to take, I don't care how pretty your stained glass windows are, if grandma gave you the land for the church to be built on. If this is where the church is gone that you're attending, get out and do not touch the unclean thing. We need to develop a ministry. Stop worshiping and worrying about the building. Worry about your soul. Do you believe in this ministry? Consider supporting it. You can mail a check to Ancient Word Radio, 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, in Sky Valley, Georgia, 30537.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth, 2, and the word ponder.com. That's truth, 2, ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.